These reviews are really gonna get doled out. I'm never gonna get anything done. I need to get my life together. A review holds a lot of implication. Often when you review a product, you're giving a general, if not extremely detailed look at everything a product has to offer. For video games, the process of reviewing becomes much more complicated. It's up to the reviewer to discuss and criticize a game, but the practice of reviewing a game is needlessly complex, simply due to the very culture that surrounds video games in general. Games can often take hours, if not days, to fully realize all of its content, and in the process of reviewing a game, you may tend to not give attention to some elements of it, either because the content doesn't matter to you, or you just plain forgot about it. Reviews are entirely based on the subjective viewpoint of the reviewer, so anything said about the game is made through that individual lens. You may not bring up specific criticism simply because it doesn't bother you, or you didn't realize it at the time. In some cases, reviewing games at all becomes trivializing if any said critiques to be made are either addressed in a future update, or you made an error. With all that being said, here's a review of 2 games that aren't finished. Let's start with the first one, Ultrakill. Released on September 3rd of 2020, Ultrakill is a low-poly FPS reminiscent of Dune 2016, Quake, and a little bit of Devil May Cry. Let me cut to the chase and say this game is excellent. The gameplay feels amazing, each of the 4 guns are a lot of fun to play around with. The movement system is very fluid and has the right amount of weight, offering a flexible and fun sandbox to just fly around and zoom around the maps. But what truly sets Ultrakill apart is its scoring systems ripped straight out of Devil May Cry. To put it simply, the game actively grades your gameplay skills, awarding quick kills, constant weapon switching, doing neat tricks, and beating the level as fast as possible. It's truly spectacular. It's ingenious gameplay for FPS design that puts Doom Eternal to shame. It's not finished. So chances are you already know what Ultrakill is, and chances are you know the game is in early access. Ultrakill is on Steam for $20. With that $20 you get a total of 14 levels and a neat endless horde mode to play around with. Now, despite what I might say later, let me preface this by saying that Ultrakill is a very unique shooter. It comes to us from low-key great indie publisher New Blood Interactive, who you might know from such games like Dusk and Medieval. And like these games, Ultrakill is very, very good. Each weapon offers their own unique utility, amazingly without one objectively topping another. The hit scan pistol is good for long range and precise shots. The shotgun can deal a lot of damage up close and is good for healing. The nail gun, while a little unwieldy, does short work on some bosses and is generally great for big crowds. The railgun, it speaks for itself. The main 10 levels are segmented into 3 acts, each offering their own unique aesthetic and level design. I was a little worried this game would be all cramped industrial rooms based on the trailers, but I'm happy to report that the game has a lot of visual variety. I particularly like the look of Act 2. The purples and blues really tie the architecture together. I don't have much to complain about this game, though I do have a few gripes that I hope are addressed as more of the content comes out. First up, I don't believe the bosses were given the equal amount of care as they should. The malicious face is fun to fight, but the first encounter is presented quite awkwardly. At the end of the first tutorial stage, you fight the face in a cramped, square arena, which makes dodging attacks relatively not fun. When you first play the game, you most likely haven't grasped how mobile you are, so when the face starts charging the laser with explosive properties, the fight can feel too cramped for its own good given the arena. The sword machine is a really cool concept for a boss, giving an enemy a moveset that prioritizes close quarters combat, which stands amongst the enemy pool which primarily use range attacks. Some of its attacks however feel a little cheap. Despite using a Bayonetta style flash to telegraph incoming attacks, the animations themselves are simply too fast for any player to realistically react to. You need to already react a few frames before the attack even starts to be able to comfortably dash out of harm's way, otherwise you're going to get hit. This contrasts with attacks that do feel fair. Launching its sword in a big circle around itself that sweeps the entire arena feels fair, as depending on where you're standing you're likely to avoid this attack. The Cerberus has a similar problem. attacks that are telegraphed, but the attack animation is simply too fast to react to. It can be a little difficult to tell what attack it will do on the first playthrough, because the ready up keyframe doesn't convey what attack it will do. Of course, on later playthroughs you'll get used to it, but it didn't feel natural to me, and I got through this boss on the first time by way of attrition rather than skill. Though the fight in general can feel fairer due to the boss's enormous size, giving yourself more chances to heal yourself since aiming is less of a priority. There's no health kits in the game. You heal yourself by absorbing the blood splatter they spew when you shoot them. Keep in mind, this is different from the malicious face and its laser. Of course, being a laser, it's going to be instant with its firing animation, but the ramp up is so long, and for a large amount of frames before the attack, it will actually rotate itself, pointing towards where it's going to fire the laser. If you're constantly moving, you're not going to get hit, but if you pay attention to where it's aiming, you have a generous amount of time to see where the face is aiming and react comfortably. As of writing this video, there is only 2 difficulty modes, so this might change on harder difficulties, but it's fine the way it is. Stomping has unique qualities, but it is unfortunately kinda useless. Using the stomp on enemies has the potential to launch them in the air or outright squishing them. The latter is much harder than it looks. The hitboxes on most enemies are just too slim to comfortably squash them. It feels awkward and it breaks the pacing of a fight when you outright miss an enemy by mere inches. Also, and this just might be me, but your melee attack doesn't feel very strong. The punch animation itself is a little too precise for me to comfortably do on enemies, and it looks a little too weak, like it's missing a couple effects to make this punch feel satisfying. The first person perspective makes timing parries not ideal in most fights. For me, it's something you had to go out of your way to do. Even though it heals the player, I could not find a moment where it felt natural to do, since I need to position myself in front of projectiles, and I just don't find that ideal. I'd like to discuss the game's graphical style. Overall, I find the direction pretty great, a modernized take on the old graphical engine used in games like Quake or Half-Life, while retaining an original style. Lots of color and nice detail here and there, and this graphical style lends itself to the gameplay. Enemy father move rather stiffly. The fills just charge towards you in a single file, which gives opportunity to rack up kills with the charged pistol or a shotgun blast. The tall grey husks just stand still and fire from range, only occasionally moving to reposition themselves. Because they like horizontal movement, it simplifies the complexity with aiming, moving, and shooting. You'll score easier headshots than you would in any other shooter, and the simple AI means there's a lack of unpredictability to throw off your in-the-moment strategy. The purple husks are rather large, and their distinct color scheme means they are easier to spot. The simplistic enemies, as a result, gives the game a lot of depth because of the tools at your disposal. The purple husk can be used to blow up other enemies when you damage them enough to start flying towards you. This also extends to the malicious face. Its laser can damage other enemies, but when defeated, the face becomes a lifeless stone that will drop to the floor, potentially killing father caught underneath. The statues can do the same if you trick them into throwing their explosive or their enemies. Though the system as is isn't completely perfect. See, with the stiff animations in mind, I can imagine aiming would still be a hurdle for some. Save for the purple husks and any mini-boss, the very slim models of the enemies make for a gameplay style that probably asks too much from the player. I've seen reports that playing the game with a controller is objectively less proficient than keyboard and mouse. This is a normal thing for any shooter, granted, but it's clear the game wasn't inherently designed for the gameplay in mind, which is a shame for those who probably don't physically feel comfortable with a keyboard. See, despite taking the design from Devil May Cry, Ultrakill kinda misses a key aspect of those games, mainly how DMC is designed. For the most part, the level design is in service of these arenas built for combat, and even in combat there are invisible design elements to make the combat more approachable. Auto aim for guns, a soft lock for melee, all attacks from enemies have long windups and clear telegraphs, a wide camera emphasizing who you're fighting, and depending on who you're playing as, you have way more movement options for offensive and defensive reactions. In contrast, the actual level design in Devil May Cry offer basic, easy to stomach platforming challenges, or just a linear haul from one arena to another. It isn't always good either. The platforming in DMC 3 can often feel awkward with how jumping works. DMC 5 did this the best, but in my opinion it still isn't very thrilling. Ultrakill isn't as graceful in this aspect. To be fair, its platforming being a priority makes sense in Ultrakill, seeing how much verticality you're capable of. There's a satisfying skill ceiling to the movement system that encourages the floor is lava mentality in fast-paced shooters. There is, however, some inconsistencies with the platforming in how instant death pits work. In the game as is, if you fall down into an active death pit, say a hole filled with lava or spikes, then it's an instant game over. Whereas falling down a literal bombless pit only damages you, much like Bayonetta. I sometimes wonder if a middle ground could have been reached. Maybe the standard difficulty makes all bombless pits empty so you just take damage instead of dying, whereas violent mode turns them all into instant death pits. Easier difficulties would lower the damage or just not damage you at all. As it is, bottomless and instant death pits function as the same obstacle, but only one kills you, and I don't like that. However, even with all that said, I do recommend this game if you're interested in a short burst of fun. The aesthetics of the levels are very well constructed. I like how the level 1 chapters are constructed with these CRT monitors creating a sunny environment that ends up being a farce. The secret missions are fun and way more creative than any of the secret missions in the Devil May Cry series. There's one where you play a bunch of puzzles from the Witness, and another where you navigate a maze in pitch darkness with an invisible monster that will instantly kill you. The soundtrack is awesome. As is, you're paying $20 for 16 levels and a relatively fun endless horde mode. It might be a bit of a steep asking price, especially since the game could climb in price as more content is released. That's apparently the state of any early access game, so it's worth noting that if you don't pay $20 for the game up front, you might need to pay more for the full version. It's just a good bit of fun through and through, and I loved it more than Doom Eternal, so check it out if you can. Bullets per minute is really cool. Here we have a rhythm-based first-person shooter roguelike in the same style as Crypt of the Necrodancer, Enter the Gungeon, and Doom, but like the old one. You make your way through a procedurally generated set of levels themed after the Norse realms, each floor topping up against a set of boss fights. You play as one of 5 Valkyries, each with their own abilities and starting stats, not unlike Binding of Isaac. However, like Crypt of the Necrodancer, the game is designed around being a rhythm game with certain inputs. Shooting, reloading, and dashing must match the beat of the soundtrack. If you miss the beat, the action won't complete and you'll lose the score multiplier. Each floor works on a room by room pace. All enemies in a room must be killed before proceeding, offering a chest as a reward with money, a health potion, or maybe an item if a gold chest appears. Overall, I'd say the music is very good. There isn't much of a variance of the genre like Necrodancer, but I did enjoy it. It balances different tones of heavy metal and rock music, gradually becoming more intense and hardcore the more floors you go down. The actual rhythm mechanic is very nicely implemented into the shooting. The specific sound effect with each bullet fired matches well with the tempo of the songs, making for kinetic and evenly paced fights. If you've ever had a sense of patternnicity when playing first-person shooters, the timing between firing a gun and instinctively reloading without paying attention to the ammo count, then you'll feel right at home. Each gun has their own method of reloading. Gall's starting pistol requires 2 inputs to completely reload the clip, whereas the Revolver uses 1 input to pop the chamber and subsequent button presses to reload each bullet. Some guns can take up to 3 inputs, making for a frenetic moment where you need to space 3 tempos to replenish ammo. Unlike Enter the Gungeon though, you effectively have unlimited ammo, so you're free to fire away without a care in the world. Before I go any further, I just want to say BPM's a neat game, and with $20 you can do a lot worse, but it's worth talking about that price point and what it means. See, when I talk about Ultrakill in terms of content in relation to the $20 price tag, it's in context that more content will be released later. With the early access label, you're spending $20 with the notion that the rest of the game will be eventually finished. Buying the game is really there to just support the devs. That being said, you're still paying $20 for a game that isn't finished. So if you pay for BPM, just know that you're paying for a game that I think isn't finished. Now saying that is a heavy accusation. As of time of writing, the game doesn't really have an early access label on their storefront, and for all intents and purposes, there is an ending to the game and everything seems to be working just fine. But there are some huge flaws with the game concerning difficulty, the pacing, repetition, and just general lack of depth and content overall. To put it simply, imagine Enter the Gungeon as is, but all that existed was 5 floors, no tutorial level, no main hub that expands as you play more of the game, and you pretty much beat the whole game after the dragon. That's how much nothingness is in BPM overall. Now I know this is a lot, so let me lay out all the problems one by one. When you start, you only have Gall to play as. You'll notice that you have other characters to play, but they are completely locked. These characters are unlocked as you play each floor. No, you don't need to complete a specific challenge in each floor, something ludicrous like beating the floor with no damage or in 30 seconds. You literally unlock characters as you complete floors. The first time you make it to Vanaheim, you unlock Freyr. The first time you clear Svartalfheim, you unlock Hildur, and so on and so forth. Meaning once you've beaten the game on easy difficulty, you've already unlocked most of the characters. However the fuck you pronounce it, is unlocked by completing the game on hard mode, but depending on loot drops, that isn't difficult, just time consuming really. It really makes me wonder why characters are locked at all. They have their own abilities, but they can't be used until you beat the game as those characters in easy and hard mode. So not counting Oder, you essentially have to beat the game a minimum of 10 times just to be able to fully play as every character, which is absurd. The reason I'm taking time to point this out is that outside of this, the game has nothing else to offer. In Enter the Gungeon, you were not only tasked with getting to the end, but there were numerous other tasks to complete outside of that. Fixing the elevators, rescuing the characters trapped in the Gungeon, completing ludicrous tasks to unlock more playable Gungeoneers, a secretive final boss that requires you to no damage every boss, buy this ridiculously expensive item in the item shop, along with other items you find in the Gungeon, and beat the dragon all on one run, and you have a secondary currency you can spend on items in the hub. Also, the dragon is way harder than Nidhogg. The problem is you don't really do anything else in the run other than get to the end. It makes each run feel relatively shallow, despite how much fun you might have. At first it might feel like the game has a deep skill for. You'll probably have a hard time getting used to the mandatory gameplay style this game asks for. I'm happy the game offers accessibility options to accommodate those who have a hard time detecting rhythm. I know a few mutuals who have a hard time playing games like these, so I commend the devs for features that can either loosen the rhythm detection or just straight up turn it off. Looking past that, however, it's very easy to break this game. So, for starters, the game has a very simple stat system, each of which can be incrementally upgraded with these statues you spend a single coin on. These span randomly in whatever room you end up in, but if luck is in your favor, you can really stack up the stats, making your character incredibly powerful. It isn't uncommon that I run into several damage statues, making runs a total cakewalk. But it doesn't stop there. You're able to pick up other weapons in a run, either from a blacksmith shop or a weapon chest that will spawn from a room clear, though it is rare. Now there is a wide assortment, and while I do find certain guns a little hard to use, there's a use for each of them. However, the chain gun is blatantly overpowered. This is a gun that requires no tempo to use. You just hold down the fire button and the bullets will spray. It can make runs an even easier ordeal, which can ruin certain boss fights for you. The first time I beat the game, I scrambled through most floors with just the chain gun. I beat bosses so fast I didn't even see their entire moveset. Beating Nidhogg was barely an ordeal. It goes even further. You can pick up 4 types of equipment which add a certain modifier to your character. Some of these modifiers can be something simple like making your character run faster, add an explosion effect while jumping, or auto aim. Yes, auto aim. The game doesn't necessarily have a standard crosshair. You have this diamond shaped crosshair which you might think is there for tempo lines, but this is an auto aim cone for firing. You don't necessarily aim your shots, but rather hover this crosshair over the enemy model and the game will aim for you, so long as the enemy is within the zone. To be fair, the normal crosshair is so small you still technically need to aim. I believe this design was done so aiming isn't so much of a hassle as other games. They need to compensate for the tempo-based shooting as it makes your rate of fire more restrictive. When you acquire the item that gives you auto aim, it just makes this crosshair bigger. But it's so big it might as well be an aimbot. If you get this along with a chain gun and a shield that gives you infinite ammo, meaning you never have to reload, you've won the game. So, despite the seemingly skill-based look of the game might simply imply otherwise, you don't actually beat the game with skill. High stats and lucky enough loot drops can determine whether you will struggle or succeed. They mostly show up in these gold chests, which spawn so frequently that you'll likely have a full set on the first floor, but many of these items are upgrades, not side grades. They don't alternate your playstyle, they just make you objectively better. There's a helmet that gives your shots explosive damage, effectively doubling your damage output. If you pair this with an item with a shield that literally doubles your damage, your base attack now does 4 times the original damage output, or 200% more damage. If you also combine this with a bracelet that doubles your shots, meaning you fire 2 bullets instead of 1, every shot is further increased by 100%, making you do 5 times or even 6 times more damage. My math might be a little off, but it's not terribly hard to break the game like this. I don't want to say the gear system is bad, however. I think I'd be singing a different tune if all the equipment did was just add flat percentage bonuses to your stats, or if no gear existed in the game at all. They work well to make the game easier if you're struggling, because nothing in the game is forcing you to use them. In my opinion, however, if there is gear that upgrades your character, then gear that downgrades your character should also exist. Or rather, if an item doubles your damage, then it would make sense that said item should say decrease your defense or make you slower. Imagine a shield that makes every enemy killable in one hit, but it also makes you killable in one hit. Of course, this would not affect bosses, so there's still a challenge. Perhaps there can be gear that just downgrades you, but in return doubles or triples your score multiplier. Equipping these items at all could be a fun self-imposed challenge, and it'd make each run feel more unique if the player chooses to play like this. I think it's a mistake that the game has no hub, or rather the game itself lacks context about the setting. In Enter the Gungeon, you come here to kill the past, which can imply different things depending on the character you play as. In Crypt of the Necrodancer, you get an introductory cutscene that not only explains your character, but even gives brief context to the rhythm mechanic. As you play the game, you even unlock more cutscenes that elaborate the main character's past, giving more depth to why you are even here. In BPM, well, you're a Valkyrie, you have a gun, and you just shoot things. That's it, there's nothing to it. Some might see this as a positive. I think this makes the game less special. Because of this, the game lacks a HUD that could have potentially be filled with flavorful characters to chat with or just hang around with. Sure, there's the two shopkeepers in the dungeon, but there's no flavor text to them. They just stand there and dance. And because there's no HUD, there's no way for the game to tutorialize you. There's no way to practice the tempo-based gameplay, so your starting hours just feel harder than it should be because it wasn't explained to you very well. Lastly, I want to touch on the game's graphics. It uses what seems like a cell shade style punctured with color-coded floors. In practice though, the game doesn't really achieve this look. It uses what is basically an Instagram filter over the game, which in my opinion only muddies up the art style of the levels. See, sometimes you can arrive on floors with certain modifiers, maybe levels don't spawn chests or coins will drop more often. In the worst case, the floor can be completely black with only a torch to light your way. This isn't ideal because now, in conjunction with a terrible filter, the game is almost uncomfortable to play like this. Not to be pedantic though, this modifier is here to make the level harder, but the filter just makes it harder than it should be. As of time of writing, there isn't a way to turn this off, and part of me feels like it should because there are certain rooms where the lighting is just too much, and making the game feel oversaturated and generally ugly. In Helheim, you have this constant glow around your gun which looks awful. Helheim itself just looks really bad with this unsaturated gray look. You'll be forgiven if you think chests don't spawn on this floor. Because of this filter, the chests are just really hard to see, which I don't think is even my own fault. I hope this gets fixed because I imagine it'll be physically difficult for certain people to play this game. You're probably wondering, Ophelia, you sure they complain a lot. Why would you even recommend these games? Well, to put it simply, I think they're just fun. They're just really cool little games that I think people should play. Simple as that. Sometimes it doesn't really matter if a game is heavily flawed in a critical sense. I had fun with these games, and I just hope that they seem fun enough to you to want to play them. The culture of gaming and criticizing them follows a very bleak and binary mentality of observing games as a medium. Arbitrary review scores, user scores, Steam reviews, and so on and so forth, and even amongst the depressingly managed AAA market filled with crappy business practices, crunch development, increased prices, and generally just a non-user-friendly method of making new games that'll eventually make playing games on low-spec rigs impossible, I believe it's important to call out the occasional unique titles that I want people to play. These two offer a very unique, one-of-a-kind gameplay experience you're very unlikely to come across in a AAA market. Even if you don't end up liking them as you feel you might have, that's okay. You gave them a try and it's good that you did. So please, I implore you, give these games a shot. You might find a new favorite, because at the end of the day, when all is said and done, fuck video games. Hi everybody, this is Ophelia. Like 4 months after starting this video because I started this video late September and then I got swamped with school and whatnot, and I'm obviously a little bit behind because Ultrakill is gonna get more content by the end of the month, apparently. And I do apologize about that. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed watching the video. I am currently planning 2 more projects in the future that I hope you will all enjoy. New Ultrakill content is pretty cool. We'll get some new levels, there's a new enemy type. Hopefully I do release this video before that content comes out because obviously all my points are going to be null in terms of pointing out the $20 price tag, so that'll be fun. Also, if it's not noticeable, I did get some new equipment, not including a brand new XLR mic. Hence why the audio right now sounds so different. In fact, if you paid attention to a certain section in the BPM section, you will notice that there's a section of the audio that sounds a bit different, and that's simply because I had to re-record some lines, and I re-recorded it with the new mic. I'm really happy to have better audio quality, and I'm looking forward to presenting my videos much better with a cleaner voice per se, because my VOs honestly suck. And it'll be worthwhile for the streams. which I will link in the description if you want to watch me stream on Twitch. Granted, the new copyright laws don't send me to jail. But yeah, sorry this video is so late. It'll definitely be outdated within, I'd say, 2 weeks. And yeah, happy holidays to you all. And I hope you're all staying safe and healthy. And, well, bye.